All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Glad to be back.
You know, I'm always fascinated by how societies try to grapple with some of these really, fundamentally tricky issues.
Yeah.
And today we're looking at religious freedom, but also the need to protect people from, harm that might be motivated by someone else's religion.
Right. A really delicate balance.
Yeah, super delicate.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at Chapter 66 of BNS 2023.
Okay.
And this document outlines all kinds of offenses relating to religion.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about damaging places of worship,
Right.
outraging people's religious feelings, even like using gestures to offend someone.
Right.
It gets pretty in-depth, so I'm really glad to have you here to walk us through all this.
Yeah, this is a fascinating area of law, for sure. It really gets to the heart of how a society tries to, protect individual beliefs while also recognizing that, there needs to be limits when those beliefs could, potentially lead to conflict or even harm to others.
Absolutely. So I guess let's just dive right in, huh?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So Section 298, I believe, deals with, the destruction, damage, or defilement of places of worship, sacred objects, that kind of thing.
Right. And it's not just about the actual physical act, right? It's really about the intent behind it.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you think about it, if someone just accidentally bumped into something and it broke.
Right.
Versus intentionally going in there to vandalize something.
Exactly. And I think that's where the intent to insult a religion really comes in. It's what, elevates it beyond just simple vandalism or property damage. Right.
Right. So spray painting a random wall versus spray painting a religious structure.
Exactly. Same act, but the intent makes all the difference.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So, and then taking this whole intent thing even further.
Yeah.
We get to Section 299, which talks about deliberately and maliciously outraging religious feelings.
Oh, wow.
Right. How do you define that?
That's a great question. Proving deliberate and malicious intent.
Right.
It can be really tricky. It often relies on the context. Think about hate speech laws, right?
Uh-huh.
A lot of times it's not just the words themselves.
Right.
It's the speaker's history, the setting, was there a potential for violence?
Right.
All those things come into play when a court is trying to figure out intent.
So context really is key.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, in Section 299, they specifically mention electronic means.
Oh, interesting.
Which I guess shows that they're trying to keep these laws up to date.
Right.
Because, you can cause just as much religious offense online as you can, in person.
Absolutely. The internet has definitely added a whole new layer of complexity to this area of law.
Right. Okay, so moving on. I think Section 300 deals with disturbing religious assemblies.
Right.
And this one seems like it could get pretty tricky, too, because how do you, draw that line between, peaceful protest and intentional disruption? What if there's a protest going on outside a place of worship during a service?
That's a good example. Peaceful protest, likely, protected under freedom of assembly.
Okay.
However, if the actions are specifically designed to, disrupt the service itself,
Right.
Using loudspeakers to drown out a sermon or blocking entrances, that's when it starts to fall under Section 300.
So it really is about intent, again.
Yeah, very much so.
Wow. Okay. And then we move to Sections 301 and 302.
Okay.
And these cover things like trespass in places of worship, indignities to corpses,
Right.
disturbances during funeral ceremonies. It's pretty wide range.
Yeah. Yeah, it covers a lot of ground. What strikes me about these sections is the focus on actions intended to, quote, wound religious feelings, end quote.
Yeah.
Even if those actions aren't, physically violent.
Right.
It's recognizing that words and gestures, especially in a religious context, can be deeply hurtful.
Yeah. I guess it really highlights the fact that harm can take many forms.
Absolutely.
But how do you prove something was intended to wound religious feelings?
Yeah, That's one of the really challenging aspects of this. It can be very subjective.
Right.
Some legal systems use this idea of a reasonable person standard. Would a reasonable person, understanding the context, find the action offensive?
Right, right.
But even that, is open to interpretation. So there's a lot of legal debate right now about how to really define and address this type of harm in a way that's fair and consistent.
Yeah. Wow. This is complicated.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex area.
Okay, so we've covered, a lot of ground here.
We have.
What are some of the key takeaways, for our listeners?
Well, I think, one of the biggest takeaways is that these laws really highlight the challenges that societies face, trying to find that balance between protecting religious freedom and also preventing actions that can cause harm or incite animosity.
Yeah.
Intent plays a really crucial role in determining the severity of an offense. And we see that time and time again throughout these different sections. And the context, too, right? That's key in interpreting the law.
Absolutely. And I think the other takeaway is that, even seemingly small actions, words, gestures, things you post online, these can have a big impact.
Especially when they're directed at someone's deeply held beliefs.
Absolutely. So, I guess it's something for all of us to think about, right? How our actions might affect others, especially in the kind of, diverse and interconnected world that we live in.
It's definitely food for thought.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
I hope you learned something.
I know I did.
We'll see you next time.
See you then.